Dreaming of owning a property in a prime location with great proximity and fantastic neighborhood? EJ Investments Sanyang Seaview Estate is the best choice you have been waiting for. Our Sanyang Seaview Estate is approximately 15 minutes drive away from the busy hub of Brusubi roundabout and into the heart of nature, where you can have a peaceful and relaxed lifestyle with your family. You can buy a finished 4-bedroom story with 5-year flexible payment plan or a service plot with 2-year payment plan option. With over 300 homes, you will enjoy big tar roads with covered drainage, modern electrification with solar street lights, gated entrance with security post, and a breath-catching experience of our beautiful sea view and lake view. You can own a home today at our Sanyang Seaview Estate. Call us today on 446-4838 or 325-9220. Visit our website on ejinvestments.net. EJ Investments, first in property.
My rights are protected. Where I have opportunities, where I have voice and power, and my will determines the way the state performs. That the state is there as a protector, not as a violator of my right. That it creates the enabling environment such that even if I want to become a dancer, I should be able to engage in that profession to be able to make ends meet, to be able to live, earn an income to live a dignified life. That's the kind of republic I want, where men and women are equal, where rights of children are respected, where persons with disability rights are respected, protected, and provided the same opportunities like any other citizen. That's the kind of republic I want. And so that kind of republic is what we will create in the kind of ideas we put in our constitution. And that is why I said the constitution effectively determines how we live in this society. Our society so far is very unequal, unjust, incredible poverty, all right, incredible deprivation, underdevelopment across, from homes to our communities and in our institutions. Should we continue in that kind of an environment? So we thank Think Young Women and its sponsors, IRI, I guess, for really taking this great initiative to support this process where governments come around to really think about our future, because this is what it's all about. So thank you very much, and we hope in the 2 days we'll have a good, discussion.
Important message to have been delivered, because you have, in fact, reminded us of the importance of a constitution in a nation and the importance of citizens being aware of the content of the constitution and being part of constitutional reform processes. As you have stated that it is a very important issue because it is a life and death issue. And I would actually agree with you on that point, because the constitution governs our lives as citizens of the Gambia. And most importantly, he had highlighted that this is not just a one-off amendment of a specific provision of the Constitution. This is a whole overhaul of the Constitution. We are reviewing a whole Constitution. Therefore, our opinions as citizens of the Gambia is very important. It should reflect what we want, and this should be in this Constitution. And he had given examples of other jurisdictions, the content and the constitution of those other jurisdictions. And most importantly, he had mentioned the United States Constitution, which is in fact referred to as a living document, because the Constitution had been drafted in a way that its content lives, meaning that it grows and changes as society evolves without even an amendment. Meaning that the Constitution reflects what is currently ongoing and what would evolve in the future. Therefore, these are constitutions that we must emulate. These are jurisdictions that we must look into. And of course, closer sister jurisdictions like South Africa and others. Therefore, Mr. Jobate, what you have stated are very important remarks, and we thank you for giving those important words. And I believe that this has created, I believe already, an internal discussion in the minds of the participants, because I have seen their expressions during the delivery of your message. Moving forward, I would introduce Mrs. Hannah Foster, the Executive Director of the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, to give a solidarity message. And again, Madam, we thank you for coming and being part of this important event.
Your Excellencies, honorable members here present, I want to first of all thank Think Young Women and the Law Hub for inviting the center to be part of this history-making consultation. History-making is a word that we have to keep on using, because this Constitution is making history, the TRRC is making history, the Land Commission is making history, and the security sector reform is making history. You know, we are in an era of making history. And today, this is an opportunity for us to also make our voices heard. When we talk about democracy, we're talking about voice and choice. And we are being reminded that we have a role to play. Many times, we tend to ignore some of these important points in our lives. I remember a project, research project that we had at the center when we were advocating for the rights of women in Africa. And we wanted to know how much the women know about these laws that are protecting them. And it was quite a disaster, a disappointment, because the laws, even national laws that we are protecting the women, that we are promoting the lives of women, less women knew even about their existence, let alone their contents. We do not want the Constitution to face the same dilemma. We want to challenge each and every one of us, yes, and particularly the women. Yes, we know that they are at a disadvantage, but we want to see them stand up and be counted. So for us at the center, we are very much interested, and I must confess that in looking at the Constitution, perhaps there are two things we need to also talk about. One, perhaps avoiding reinventing the wheel, one, and two, building up on existing progressive provisions. So it will be up to us to look at it. Madi has spoken very well in terms of ensuring that we play our roles in making sure that we come up with the document that we want. We come up with the Constitution that we want, that we would want to live with. And it is not what Madi wants or what Hannah wants, but what you as a citizen believe you can work and live under. And perhaps your family up to posterity, Madi said forever and ever. That's what we would want to envisage. But anyway, we have to ensure that our voices are heard, and that the Constitution also provides those choices that makes democracy a reality. Yes, it's history again. We are rebuilding democracy in the Gambia. Yes, perhaps bringing it down and building democracy and making sure that this Constitution will provide the necessary foundation that we need to move forward. I don't want to repeat too many things, but let me conclude that let us not take our roles lightly, and let us ensure that our voices are heard. I heard Madi spoke about nothing should change. I smiled because the second Constitution, we had challenges. There wasn't sufficient time to review the document, and there were certain provisions that were taken out. Yes, in the original draft that we all knew about, and they were deleted. So perhaps we need to be our brothers and sisters keepers and to make sure that we have access to the document and the competent persons within our groups are able to advise and quickly make attempts to ensure that whatever is important to us remains in that document. I want to thank you once again and to reiterate the commitment of the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, which I lead, and some of our partners from the Community of Democracies, from the World Movement for Democracy, from the Africa Democracy Forum, to support and to collaborate in this venture of nation building in the Gambia. I thank you for your kind attention.
For that solidarity message, and in your discussion you've highlighted two very important issues, one of them being the challenges we have in respect of what I call watering down legislation.
The International Republican Institute and IFES stands for the International Foundation for Electoral Systems. Under the CEPS program, we are receiving funding from United States Agency for International Development, USAID. It's through the kind courtesy of USAID that we've been able to sponsor this event today. IFES is a global partner in democracy and elections. So IFES will be working along with the IEC, providing technical assistance as the IEC goes through its electoral reform processes, planning for a possible referendum, and its 2021 elections. So, experience and history has shown to us that one way to live in peace and harmony is our commitment to democratic processes. And I believe that commitment is evidenced today. Your appearance here today is a demonstration of your commitment to the democratic processes in the Gambia. I'd like to applaud you as the Gambia embarks on the process of reviewing its constitution, reforming its electoral laws. I'm confident that this platform will provide an opportunity so that stakeholders can ask the hard questions, so that stakeholders can also provide information. And I'm confident that at the end of the 2 days of deliberation, we will leave here being quite knowledgeable about the transition and the processes surrounding the transition in the Gambia. So once more, I'd like to thank you for coming today. I also convey special thanks to the organizer, Think Young Women and the Law Hub Gambia for organizing such a splendid program, and I wish you all the best in the coming deliberations. Thank you.
We once again want to express our appreciation to the IRI for supporting this event and this process, which is very important. And like you had mentioned, commitment is key, and the turnout clearly indicates the commitment of relevant stakeholders in this process. And of course, it doesn't only stop at turning out in this deliberation, but also casting a vote, which is a very important right that you have that needs to be exercised, as it would express your belief, your views, and of course, what you want for the Gambia as a whole. Thank you so much for that wonderful message. And I believe this brings us to the end of the opening ceremony of this event. And proceeding here, we would take a group photo and go in depth into the program proper. Again, welcome everyone. Thank you for your attendance, and the media, thank you for coming on time and covering this very important event.
So if you look at the program, my topic is constitutional reform process in the Gambia, the way forward. I know there is a key address. They said keynote address in front of it. Don't mind that. I'm not that important to give a keynote address. What I actually want to do is just to give more of a broader context So as I said, it's less of a statement and more of painting some broad strokes in terms of the thematic issues that we'll deal with for the next 2 days, in terms of raising some key questions and so forth. I do talk a little bit fast, so I'll try to slow down as well. So anyway. Okay, so the title is Constitutional Reform Process in the Gambia, the Way Forward. And as Marietta said, so I wear both hats. I am a legal scholar as well as an activist. So I will try to sound less of a scholar and more of an activist. Okay, so I just wanted to briefly give an overview of the Gambia's constitutional context and background. As we all know, the transition to the current democratic dispensation, as I highlighted in the opening ceremony, is a powerful and fundamental process for Gambians. Us as Gambians have been looking forward to a constitution that will usher in a new democratic dispensation founded on good governance and capable of delivering sustainable development. Throughout the consultations that were conducted by the Constitutional Review Commission, we're happy that we do have a commissioner from the Constitutional Review Commission as well as staff of the commission with us today. They did have consultations, as highlighted also in the opening ceremony, with Gambians at home and abroad, and there has also been a constant call for democracy and good governance. But we do know that citizens have also lamented about the poor services, the incidents of corruption, as well as the overbearing power of the state. Hence, the constitution that the Gambia deserves should be one that will uphold the sovereignty and fundamental rights and freedoms of the citizens. The primary function of constitutions, as we all know, is to establish power maps for the exercise of public power in a fashion that ensures that power is limited and restrained. This is a key preoccupation of the constitutional law and the core of constitutionalism. Broadly speaking, and just to wear my academic hat, constitutionalism, when we talk about constitutionalism, it really encompasses a number of elements, such as the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms, the concept of separation of powers, the rule of law, the independence of the judiciary, the review of laws for constitutionality, and the regulations of the amendments to the Constitution, as highlighted earlier. One of the key problems with the 1997 Constitution is the fact that it has gone through more than 50-something times through amendments with regard to the different provisions of the Constitution. So it is therefore important that these elements, it is also important that we know that whilst these are really important things to have in a constitution, it does not also automatically mean that when we have it in the constitution, it guarantees constitutionalism. However, their inclusion is critical. So to avoid the pitfalls of the past, including the outcomes of the 1996 National Consultative Committee and some of the retrogressive actions that were taken on the draft report and the draft constitution submitted by the then Constitutional Review Commission in 1996, I highlighted by Madam Foster with regard to some of the changes that were made to the draft. It is pertinent that this time around that we are more proactive and committed and are committed in terms of engagement of all citizens and citizen groups in the process. Given that the Constitutional Review Commission Act of 2017, as highlighted during the opening ceremony, did not specifically give timelines and actions after the draft constitution is submitted to the president, all the more lends credence to the need to have this forum as a means to ensure that ultimately the Gambia obtains a constitution that truly reflects the wishes of its people and not to serve the objectives of a president or vested interests of politicians. It is then timely to ask, what then after the collation of our wish list? Because what the Constitutional Review Commission did with the consultations with Gambians both in the country and outside the country, as well as the various submissions that have been done with people in this room as well as people outside of this room, is to put together our wish list. So what the draft constitution will be is what we wish for as citizens. So therefore, this quick, as I said, this quick overview will really try to raise key questions regarding the next steps after the submission of the draft constitution as well as the report to the president by looking at the various thematic focus of this workshop. So firstly, in terms of timelines and processes. So as I highlighted, whilst the CRC Act 2017 clearly stipulates the functions and the key milestones of the CRC, it did not mention the timelines or specific activities relating to the legal processes that will take place after the submission of the draft constitution to the president or even after its publication, as highlighted during the opening ceremony. Currently, stakeholders involved in these processes are referring to the provisions of the 1997 Constitution relating to the amendment of specific constitutional provisions. However, it is important that we know that the Constitution is actually silent on how to handle a complete overhaul of the Constitution, and this has not been provided for. So given that there are no clear guidelines or timelines regarding the legal processes after the submission and publication of the draft, I want to raise some certain key issues. One, when does the President pass the draft Constitution to the National Assembly? Two, when does the bill get gazetted first and then subsequently gazetted to follow laid down procedures in the Constitution, including the second and the third readings? Three, and Madi raised this issue, should the President change the draft or not? The other question will be, four, should the National Assembly be able to change the draft Constitution or not? And the fifth question is, when does the Speaker of the National Assembly refer the bill to the IEC for referendum? Six, what is the time frame for conducting such a referendum? And finally, if the referendum goes accordingly, when is the bill referred to the President with the IEC certification for his assent? These and many other questions that we hope to get answers to in the next two days. So these are some of the questions that we will want panelists to deal with, as well as a discussion and a conversation with stakeholders in this room. On democracy building processes, focusing on electoral reforms, we do know that the 1997 Constitution, despite its shortcomings, does contain democratic principles. It establishes representative institutions and protects civil liberties and political rights that are not only relevant, but also essential for a competitive democratic system. It establishes multiple levels of government. We do have local government representatives in here as well. And it also institutionalizes multi-party democratic order. Political parties are constitutionally guaranteed the right to exist in the country and to participate in the democratic elections at all levels of government. Moreover, we do have local and national elections that have been regularly held after the promulgation of the 1997 Constitution. However, despite these very progressive provisions, the competitive multi-party democracy that the Constitution envisions remains a pious wish. So against this background, we want to ask, what are the necessary constitutional and legislative measures that need to be put in place to ensure a democratic dispensation, including electoral reforms, as part of and an objective of constitutional building? The task facing us now is to find the right balance between competition and accommodation, so allowing enough inclusion for everyone to feel that they have a stake in the system and the processes, while also maintaining sufficient levels of competition to promote accountability and enable citizens to vote out poorly performing governments or even recall non-performing elected representatives, for instance, in the National Assembly. On the third theme, the importance of citizenship consultation, engagement, and education. The Gambia's constitutional review processes grew from a broader democratic reform movement and designed to be people-driven. The public participation processes by the CRC and the invitation to make submission has actually sparked off an important debate: what issues and rights should be dealt with or stipulated in the new Constitution. Upon the submission of a detailed draft, experiences from elsewhere have highlighted the need to receive comments on the draft Constitution. Whilst participatory procedures are important in legitimizing the process and consolidating democracy, they can also generate severe costs in terms of expense and time. Thus, in certain cases, public consultation is not so common, and it is usually done at the preparation of the draft stage. This is sometimes mainly, as I said, is due to organizational or resources issues. For instance, copies need to be printed and distributed, as well as translated into local language. For example, in the case of South Africa, when they were enacting their 1996 Constitution after the end of apartheid, it is estimated that 4.5 million copies of the draft were distributed in 11 languages. In other cases, there have been incidences where adequate explanatory materials have been produced to provide enough information for meaningful public participation that is produced to ensure this. However, the general consensus is that it is possible to have public consultation both before and after the draft is prepared, which is becoming the common practice, as in the case of the 2010 enactment of the Kenyan Constitution. So people's views should be obtained both in advance of a draft being prepared to assist in its development, but also after it has been completed to test whether it meets the people's concerns and aspirations. The advantage of this practice is that the public can react to a concrete and comprehensive set of proposals. They can now judge to what extent their views have been taken seriously or incorporated. The period of public consultation can also be seen as a chance for peer review, An examination of the document strengths and weaknesses and the opportunity to correct policy and drafting errors. In certain countries, experts have been invited to review the draft. It is important to ensure that the public is correctly informed about the contents of the draft and allowed to make an assessment of it, since a constitution is the people's laws, one that they give to themselves. Here, civil society and academics can play a vital role. It is also another chance to build consensus. I just wanted to highlight the political scientist Muna Dulo has made similar broad argument for the need for consultation in constitution drafting, stating that a constitution should be the product of the integration of ideas from all major parties in the country. That is, all political parties, both within and outside parliament, organized civil society, and individuals in the society. A constitution perceived as having been imposed on a large segment of the population or having been adopted through the manipulation of the process by some of the stakeholders is unlikely to gain sufficient popularity or legitimacy to endure the test of time. On divisive and contentious issues, the key question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we reach decisions on potentially divisive issues? One of the panels in this workshop is a first step in identifying the contentious issues, followed by how to build consensus on such issues. There is no ready-made algorithm for solving divisive issues in the constitutional negotiations or constitutional drafting process. Given that the drafting process is led by the CRC, this is actually a great opportunity, given that the CRC, the commissioners, are actually made of independent body of experts, and we have been able to tap into this expert knowledge. There has been promotion of public participation, as well as formulation of proposals that are oriented towards a national interest. So this should potentially serve as a basis for negotiations and consensus building, thereby facilitating a compromise. However, it is critical to ensure the public participation after the consultation, or after the submission of the draft rather, should be preceded by civic education on constitutional principles and the constitutional making process, because transparency and clarity on the rules and procedures followed at the various stages of the process are crucial. On the inclusion of divisive issues in the Constitution, we can ask ourselves these questions drawing from the South African experience to serve as guidelines. First, does the implementation of democracy and the constitutional state based on constitutional values, such as equality, human dignity, and freedom, requires its inclusion either as an institutional necessity or in view of the country's history and needs? Second, is it necessary for effective and democratic government? And thirdly, will it be conducive to an integrated approach? In other words, is it not sufficiently dealt with or likely to be dealt with elsewhere in the Constitution or another legislation? We do know that constitutional making process is complex, and there always arises contentious issues that must be dealt with. It is a reality that we will be faced with the challenge of developing a final document in which citizens and groups can take ownership of, but which also will mean that despite some of the things that certain groups and individuals want, this will not be highlighted in the final document. So for example, where do we stand as a society, individually and collectively, on the issues of equality between women and men, on the issue of reproductive autonomy, on the issue of sexual minorities, that is lesbians, gays, bisexual, transgender, and intersex, given the prevalence of religion and culture in the society? How do you balance between the majority voices as well as the minority views? As the former president of the Constitutional Court of South Africa explained, respect for human dignity is a foundational value that is crucial for addressing conflicting issues or interests. This is embodied in the concept of Ubuntu, a constitutional value that emphasizes respect for human dignity through the recognition of a person's status as a human being entitled to unconditional respect, dignity, value, that also requires that the person has the corresponding duty to give the same. Therefore, in terms of the need for a transformative constitution, as I highlighted in the beginning, the Gambia has a historic moment of eventually adopting a transformative constitution, such as, for instance, the South African Constitution or the Kenyan 2010 Constitution. So, for instance, South Africa, during the adoption of its 1996 Constitution, after the end of apartheid, it has actually led to one of the most progressive constitutions in the world, in which other countries like Kenya have actually modeled their constitutions against. So one of the key objectives of that constitution is the transformation of the South African society. These elements of transformation, for example, include the dismantling of a plethora of racist and sexist laws and institutions, redressing their legacy, healing the divisions of the past, and building a new society committed to social justice and the improvement in the quality of people's lives. Therefore, especially for the case of Gambia, and this is to contextualize it, there is a need to have a constitution that is also a social, cultural, and economic tool that serves to better civilize, humanize, and empower individuals to live and let live in peace and harmony with everyone else. For that matter, our goal should be the transformation of the Gambian society, which will include the dismantling of discriminatory laws, especially ones against women. That has, I can go on for the whole day with regard to that issue, so let me move on. As well as affirming the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. To conclude, pluralism, democracy, human rights, rule of law, and good governance should be ideologies that are championed voluntarily by both government as well as civil society, as well as stakeholders in this room. In that context, and just to paraphrase the late South African Chief Justice Ismail Mahood, who stated, all constitutions seek to articulate with differing degrees of intensity and detail the shared aspirations of a nation, the values which bind its people and which discipline its government and its national institutions, the national ethos which defines and regulates that exercise, and the moral and ethical direction which that nation has identified for its future. This constitutional reform process is therefore envisaged to provide us a new constitutional framework to deal with the perennial ills such as dictatorship, repression, human rights violation, corruption, and mismanagement of state property and poverty. The question, therefore, is whether the Gambia is capable of giving itself a constitution that will usher in a new society of democracy and good governance that will ensure social and economic justice and peace and dignity. The ball is in our court. Thank you.
In fact, it highlighted some of the questions that we would be asking the panelists and some of the questions that we will be asking the participants. And I believe that it was a very, very useful statement that you had given, as it gave us an insight of the issues that are currently being faced in respect of this constitutional reform process. And I would want to open up a brief discussion on some of the issues that you have highlighted. In particular, I will throw one of the questions that you have ended with to the floor. And that question was whether the Gambia is capable of giving itself a constitution that will usher in a new society of democracy and good governance that will ensure social and economic justice in peace and dignity. This is the question that I'm throwing here to the floor, and I want to have your responses. Can we, because if we say the Gambia, we're talking about us. So can we do this? I want to have responses from the participants, and briefly we discuss this issue before we move on to the main panel discussion.
To a degree, yes, it could be done. But to a higher degree, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we have a lot to do, a lot of things to do to enlighten the people, for them to understand what the Constitution stands for. That is their lives, their whatever they stand for as Gambians. But then, I would not want to sit down with only that answer. I have certain questions that I may want to throw onto the organizers. And then we are gathered here as an initiative of two important bodies, women organizations. And then we're going to discuss, dialogue, and come to one way or the other an understanding. My question just follows what is on the board. After the gathering, after the collection of these ideologies, what next? How are we going to submit it to government? And whether government is going to accept it? Which line of process is going to, is this thing going to be placed under? Because it is said that there is no avenue where this, after the draft, constitutional draft is handed to the president, nothing is laid down to tell us what's going to happen with it. But now, if we do our part now, would he accept it? Or should it be done through the president? Or is there a legal body that you people are going to pass this information to look at it. I think it is important because in as much as we respect those people who are part of the Constitutional Review Committee, but nonetheless, our ideas which have been collected over time could be corroded. And then we don't want that. We want the information that they have collected, the right information, to surface in the Constitution or the draft. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bakary Songo from the National Youth Parliament of the Gambia. Yes, I believe that we can usher in a constitution that is going to uplift the life of people economically. Because I believe that if the constitution is made as that of the people and the constitution is not left only alone to politicians to decide on our fate. We've seen what has happened. A lot of things happened in the past we didn't have control over. Now the Constitutional Review Commission came to give us that platform to write our own story, to say that this is what we want for ourselves as Gambians, and this is what we want to see for the future of the Gambia. And I believe if we take this upon as a responsibility upon ourselves to make sure that this constitution represent our needs, represent our hopes, and represent the aspirations of Gambians. And I believe that we can usher in a constitution that is going to make sure that young people, that is going to make sure that people of this country are fully, take fully ownership of their own life. Here, we have to participate, like the question, what next beyond the draft? Civil society needs to take their stand here. This is the most important time that the country needs civil society to stand than ever. We have to make sure that we take fully responsibility of this constitution, making sure that it is not left to the president to decide on for us, because it is the collective effort of Gambians that brought about this change, that brought about the Constitutional Review Commission or any other reform. So it is the same people who have to take up the responsibility again to make sure that we take ownership, full ownership, not to say that it belongs to a party. The party does not matter here anymore. It is the Gambia that matters a lot. And the Gambia comprises of you and I. So it is civil society, it is political parties, it is different individuals that have to take up this responsibility to make sure that we usher in a constitution that is going to reflect the needs and aspirations of Gambians, and most especially young people. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Khadija Ngom. I'm representing GWCC. Following the lady's question, yes, we can. I'm taking the Obama slogan. There's nothing like we cannot do. Say we won't do it or we will not do it. But if we put our minds to it, we work as one unit, not dividing, not separating, all inclusive. We'll definitely do and move Gambia forward. I mean, if we, whatever the Constitution was before, what was it before the one that is before? It was change. And whenever there's a change, there's a reason for it. We cannot stay as we were since colonial days. We have changed so many times. And if it's necessary to change as many times as possible to get what we want, so do it. She mentioned Kenya. I've been in Kenya 17 years. I've seen Kenya from 2002 to now, and I've seen change. And it's like the people talking. Government is just a unit. We are government, we are the people, we are the citizen. And we have to make the decision, and they have to listen to us. I mean, we cannot say, leave it all to government. If we do so, then why are we here? We're here to make the change. And definitely, if we try and put our heads as one, we'll definitely do it. Thank you.
You know, when I want to contribute or speak, I like to stand up so that I can have authority and influence. It's important. My name is Seni Marena. I work with the Constitutional Review Commission as the head of media and communication. And very fundamental questions been raised here today by Satang. And I will endeavor to answer, because at least we are here as a team. We have a very solid team here. Our youth commissioner, Yankuba Manjang, is here, and I understand he will also do a presentation so that at least we can ally the fears of the civil society. A lot of questions have been raised as to when the draft will be out. And rest assured, the draft will be out, and the civil society will continue to play their part in order to ensure that we have a constitution that will stand the test of time, a constitution that will reflect the collective wills and aspirations of Gambians. And that is the journey we are on, and we are happy that we are not alone in this journey. Coming to Satan's question, I will try to answer what next after the draft. That is why this event today is very important. The civil society need to take the lead, because let me remind you, the CRC, like any other commission, is established by an act of parliament that make it lawful institution, and therefore anything that has to do with it, it has to be lawful. So the CRC mandate ends immediately after the submission of the draft, and the act did not even say when should the president, accept the draft. Let's say after the submission of the draft, how long will the president, have time to, release the draft? So I think it's important. This program is very important for civil society to ensure that, when the draft is out, they follow to the last minute to ensure that whatever is in the draft, it remain there. That is why when we are publishing the draft, which will be in a few weeks' time, it will be publicized. We'll make copies available, and then we will also engage Gambians from all walks of life. We have started our media campaign to ensure that at least this document is well known, because you remember, we consulted. This is the most inclusive process Gambia has known. When you look at the 1997 Constitution, those who were tasked to draft it, stay in Banjul. But we endeavor to go around, consult with Gambians, both home and abroad. Why do we do that? We want to ensure that, the document we have prepared is acceptable by all Gambians. And that's our objective. We cannot afford to fail. And we cannot do this alone. That is why the civil society, you have more work to do than ever. And the last opportunity that you need to grab is when we present this draft. We are giving you an opportunity to look at this content very well. Ask yourself, we had consultation. Is this the issues raised? Are they all inclusive in this? That's your last opportunity. If you miss it, you miss a big opportunity. And I myself, I'm in the civil society field. I know how important and how passionate everyone is to ensure that we have a constitution. After 22 years of brutal dictatorship, more than 52 amendments, we need a new progressive constitution. That is why the composition of the commission, when you look at it, is people from very broad-based backgrounds. We have lawyers with over 40 years experience, youth leaders, media specialists, draftmen, and we didn't stop there. We even brought in consultants with vast experience in constitutional building process so that we have a rich document. And I want to tell you that, yes, we have the capacity. Yes, we can deliver a constitution. And look, Gambia's new constitution will be a model for other countries, I can assure you that. So just to allay your fears, you have a work to do. What next after the draft? You are next. Keep fighting for it. Make sure that what is in the draft remain in the draft. And this is politics. Constitutional building everywhere in the world is highly political. People don't know. It's different interests. How do we manage the expectation of Gambians? It's a challenge to the commission, and I know we'll overcome it. I'm confident, and I know Gambia will have a constitution that will stand the test of time, a constitution that we will all be proud of, be part of the history. Thank you.
Baran yilla domoro ka diaten.
Boy, jannon Seekers restaurant.
Sa nako be ni na dimbal. Nimba domoro kala janno.
Domoro seneyata adiyata topotoro fanan kende ma bije. Luntan during tamala abeka domoro ki janni. Adi manda wala de. Teka we bijele anim fanan ka fa di jang ikono e fa. E ka fa minne ko pastry anim bakery. Iko fanan be kalele. Ba de lomba conference lomba workshop lomba ye fo fendin lon dunia kono. Domoro betama nyillom international otoda #1.
Amanke ba domola jandama.
Esa domo jang is atariya.
Awo mu kubandi.
Sa nako sa futandi.
Oto sa nako be mu Seekers restaurant.
Ndaba na janna mu yat ni manje dorom bijam.
Aban.
Seekers Restaurant, known for best quality food and customer satisfaction.